Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth and final installment of Preservation in Practice, panel with Ariana Makau and Lindsay Jones, presented by Dumbarton House. Today, we are thrilled to be discussing the future of historic preservation and what might come next for this long and storied industry. So first, I would like to ask Ariana and Lindsay to share a little bit about themselves and their businesses and how they see the future of historic preservation looking and what their goals are for that. And then we'll dive into some more questions. Ariana, would you like to head us off?
Sure. Hopefully you won't hear there it goes, the alarm that goes off in our neighborhood on normal times. It's nothing to be concerned about. It's just they're checking the system. So I am Ariana Makau. I am the owner of Nzilani Glass Conservation. In more recent times, we sort of refer to ourselves as Nzilani Glass because we also do new fabrication, either matching historic stained glass or leaded art glass windows, or doing something completely new. We are based in the unceded territories of the Ohlone people, who are known to be in the whole Bay Area. And for me, that's really important to do a land acknowledgement because preservation, specifically with historic stained glass, deals with a lot of hazardous materials. So thinking about lead oxide and asbestos and other things that we don't want to put back into the water, because I also like to live here and experience the Bay. So we do a lot of health and safety practices. The mission statement of Nzilani is be safe, have fun, do excellent work. We like to be safe because that informs everything else that we do, having fun in historic preservation and also doing excellent work doing it. And then thinking about how the whole movement of historic preservation should change or adapt to survive and thrive moving forward. I really would like to see, and I'm active in pursuing how we can cast a wider net into who works on preservation and what is preserved. So listening to people who have always had a voice but haven't always been heard about their history and what is important to them and how that's preserved. And sometimes it's not a tangible thing. Sometimes it's stories being told from one person to another, thinking about tangible and intangible objects and how those are preserved. And then thinking about what is a preservationist, what people's viewpoint is of a preservationist who has the skill set to do the work. And I really don't think it's a binary on-off, either you have all the skills or you don't. It's always a journey. I feel like I'm always learning something new from other people and other trades. And so for me, I think to get people continued to be excited about the work that we do and also get a new generation of people interested in what we do, we really need to learn how to speak everyone's language, or at least to, the initial steps towards that, and also have a really broad scope. It's a big tent, everyone can fit. I don't think things need to be proprietary.
Wonderful, thank you. Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Lindsay Jones. I own Blind Eye Restoration in Columbus, Ohio. It is actually the native lands of the Seneca people. Thank you, Ariana, for reminding me. We are a 100% woman-owned and at least 75% women-crewed construction restoration firm. We work primarily on historic architectural buildings, as well as public art maintenance and consulting. So I am in my 6th year of business, but I have gotten to this place where what we do kind of depends on the client that I have. So our bread and butter is windows and doors, but I have always wanted to do more public art maintenance. I had a job in the past where I worked side by side with an objects conservator, and they basically treated me as an apprentice, and I worked on public art maintenance with them for several years. And I have mentors in steel windows and stained glass and welding and fabrication, and there's all these possibilities for working on historic buildings when you have the very basic understanding of try to maintain as much as possible, do no harm, make things reversible, use safe, historically appropriate materials as much as possible, and really pay attention to the structure of the building. How it was originally built, how it was meant to function is different than how modern construction functions. And so things that I would like to see change specifically, because I came to this from so many different places, is like Ariana said, widening that description of what a preservationist is, how you educate a preservationist, what is your actual background required to be, how do you get there. I'd really like to see a lot more preservation in the grade school level, K through 12. Almost all of my employees came to me with absolutely no background or understanding of what historic preservation was. They came in and they're like, I guess I'm good with hand tools, or they just heard about us working on public art. We have a lot of art students that come from local art college that funnel in that way. It's really great, but almost nobody knows anything about historic preservation. And I would just love to have that be something that's more part of our larger cultural vocabulary, that people even know that what we do exists, because there is really so much work. High tide raises all boats, that kind of thing. Like, there's work for everybody if more people just realize what it was that we do, the benefits of it, how satisfying and enriching it is for both the people who work on it and the people who have the work done for them. And yeah, I think just a more acceptance of different pathways into that, and knowing that preservation is not just one thing only. There are lots of ways to approach it, and it doesn't have to be like a boring history lecture or the paperwork process. There's so much hands-on and practical scientific study, so many facets that I think are so fascinating and really untapped at this point, and I'd love to see them get more attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never really thought about it before, but historic preservation really does cover kind of all of the academic areas. You have like the trades, you have the humanities, you have STEM education that goes into it. Really anybody with any background can approach this work, which is really fascinating to think about. So our first big question that I'm going to ask here is, what are your goals for the future of your business? And how do your future goals intersect with the future of the historic preservation movement more broadly?
Is that me again? Yes. So as Lindsay knows, we actually were just at a National Stained Glass Association of America conference last week. It was really lovely to meet Lindsay in person finally after this year of Zoom presentations. That I was just nominated and accepted to be the second vice president of the association, and one of the key requirements of that position is strategic planning or long-term planning. So for me specifically, that again sort of ties back to what my expectations are for reaching out to a new group of people who may not know about this as a profession. So even though Nzilani will continue as we always have, and it's going to be our bread and butter is doing stained glass conservation and preservation, what I really want to share is all the experience that we've had in going through health and safety specifically for our needs and what our windows are, and sort of broadening that expectation as well for how people approach preservation, because as Lindsay said, it still is very commonplace to talk to someone and say, you know, this is what I do as a profession. Oh, I never knew that was a possibility. So within the Bay Area, there's such a wealth of historic buildings that need to be preserved, and people who want to fix them, and, you know, switching that dialogue from fix to preserve is really, really important. And so that's sort of my goal in the next couple of years is to, we've already made some inroads, but making things that are a little bit more tangible and anchored within, we're not carrying everything, right? So it's sharing the information and having more people know about it. And then continuing to work on these amazing projects that we have had the luxury to work on. We're really known for doing really large projects, but for me, I would love to make more inroads into historic buildings that have not in the past been, that they're underrepresented because there hasn't been funding. And that's the only thing that's holding the projects from moving forward. So that's my goals, is one of my goals is shining a light on those projects.
All right. So my goals are, I think, in terms of growth and project focused, a little different. Like I said, our bread and butter are like windows and doors, and I do love them, but it doesn't allow for a lot of other projects. When we really dig ourselves in, suddenly we find that all we're doing is windows and doors. And the special projects that we'd like to be doing are public art maintenance, some new stained glass projects, and consulting, and larger fabrications and public art. The work just gets gets pushed out to the side. And so we are kind of aiming to, we're going through a growth phase right now, I guess, that, which, we've gotten to the point where we know we can get the big jobs. So we're going to kind of try and bring it back and narrow it in. Our values, our company values, are health, sustainability, and beauty. And health is the health of our crew, health of our clients, and the health of the buildings that we work on, buildings and structures. So really working on just upgrading everything we can in our facility, and for our job site work, so that all of that takes place. We're doing pretty good, but there's always, little things that you can tick off and do a little bit better at. And sustainability, we would love to really nail down our product use using more sustainable products, products that we feel good about sourcing and using and not harming the environment, making sure that, it kind of goes into the health aspect, but like filtering our water. Ariana pointed that out to me as an option. And we have been keeping our paintbrushing stuff out of the sink, but there are more things that we can do. So that, and of course, keeping things out of the landfill. I love working on any building that was really so far gone that was the next option. So those are fantastic jobs, and I will always love to take those on. But the final value is beauty, and I really would love to kind of help more people see the beauty in their own homes, and the beauty in kind of the mundane, and help them work on learning how to fix things for themselves. We have found that it's actually not as profitable for us to do residential, as much as I love it, and I will talk on it to ad nauseum. It's just not as good for our business model currently, financially. So my goal is probably to pull back a little bit more from residential and do more teaching and workshops. We have relationships with local nonprofits to get AIA credits so that we can bring in more local architects, and just really make a bigger presence known of the workshops that we can provide to people, and put a little bit of oomph behind it that, you know, this is real. This is something that you should know. Has a lot of value to it. So more workshops, getting our shop up and running, even smoother, you know, well-oiled machine kind of thing, and reeling back from just go, trying to make money, to really nailing down our values, and working on more of the art projects, special workshops, and really I'd like to train up more of the crew. We've had a very kind of a short-term, slightly high turnover student population, and I'd like to, now that we're getting into our groove, we're offering more benefits and higher pay, and really trying to make it more of a long-term option for people. So making the actual working environment better, and all of the above, so people are excited to come to work.
That sounds awesome. My next question for both of you is about which organizations, groups, or individuals are you looking to as leaders in historic preservation? Who is bringing this movement into the future?
First off, us, right? I think it should be noted that, you know, we have dedicated our time to talking to people over the last year, when things have been really challenging for our companies and for the world in general. And so, you know, I think it goes undersung quite often that people don't give themselves credit for what they're doing. And so we should pause and give ourselves some accolades for that. Secondly, I think what the future brings, and what you look for in someone who's leading the charge, is someone who is in dialogue with other people. They're not speaking within isolation, and through community and collaboration, that's where you find the most exciting and forward-thinking groups. I have, in the last year and a half, really had some great experiences with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And so I would call them out as a group, and also specifically working with, sorry, there's this very large truck outside, working with Milan Jordan of the Hands-On Preservation Experience crew, and Molly, who's there as well. That experience was really great. And the fact that they're going out and finding organizations throughout the country to pair up with, I think, again, that collaborative spirit, rather than working in isolation and being sort of this group on high that bestows information or funding without working together, that's a business model that has sort of past its time. And so working with them has been really great. I think I'll pass that on to Lindsay. There's lots of other people, but that's the first organization that comes to mind that I've been working with pretty closely in the last year and a half.
Yeah, I'd say the National Trust is a good organization. Like, program wise, I really like what they do with their easements, and the people that they talk to and reach out to. The Preservation magazine was really great, being a part of that. I would say my favorite organization to reach out to, aside from my local preservation groups, which Heritage Ohio and Columbus Landmarks are fantastic. If you are, if anybody out there is looking for somebody to connect with, always connect with your local preservation organization first, just to, you know, get something started, figure out what's happening in your own community. I will go with Ariana there on tooting our own horn. Nothing's going to happen if you don't make it happen. And I feel like the both of us have really been out there this past year. And I mean, that's what you have to do to keep your business running. It's kind of it's a form of marketing, but it's also just, you know, being really passionate about what you do. And anybody who is in the field, I think, would do the same, as long as we all knew that we were encouraged to do so. You know, everybody has knowledge and value, and you can't have the same people teaching the same workshop over and over. We need the variety of all the different voices. Somebody or a group that I really enjoy right now is the Preservation Trades Network, PTN. I went to their first conference that they've had in like 3 years. Andrea Savante is the president, and they put together a really, really great conference. Lots of different people from different fields teaching and really giving you very, very practical hands-on how-tos for all the different things. We had, there was stained glass, there was dry stone stacking, there was plaster decorative casting. We did terrazzo. There was a terrazzo class, which I thought was amazing. And intaglio. Anyway, lots of different stuff. It was so fun, and so many different people that you get to meet in different trades from around the country. And it was a joy. And I think that any group like that is somebody that we should all take part in, even if it's not necessarily your trade specific. Sometimes it's just really good to know about the adjacent trades. Who else is working in your field doing similar things as you, or who has a similar passion as you, and then you can work together and create those blended voice workshops, you know, networking, and it just makes all of us stronger in the end anyway.
Absolutely. Dumbarton House has a clock in its collection that's very famous because it came from the first studio that employed all of the different people needed to make a clock in one place, rather than farming out the cabinet to one person and the clock making to one person. They did it all in one studio. And so it's the first time that happened. And it was a really big deal. And so I think those kind of connections that bring everybody together will always make historic preservation stronger. I mean, really any industry that you're in, the more networking you can do, the better work you're going to do as well. So the next question that I have for you guys is, you both talked especially about widening the opportunities that are available for people to get into historic preservation. And so I'm curious about what kind of supports, if that's grants or infrastructure or legislation, government supports, what kind of, what needs to be in place to help achieve that future and create more opportunities for more people to be a part of this conversation and this movement?
I think, like Lindsay mentioned, starting from a pretty young education and understanding that this is a profession that is valid and is validating and should be recognized as such, as something that you can earn a living wage from. I think there's a lot of, I've spoken about this in past discussions, that there is sort of this hierarchy still that is attributed to people in the trades versus people who do other work. And I think there needs to be a blurring of lines of what that is. And so people who want to go into this profession can earn a living wage off of it. I also think, also coming from a woman-owned business, 100% woman-owned, 100% Black-owned business, that we still need to push forward and support each other in the work that we do. And you look at who is running the organizations, who is the one who's deciding what projects get funded, which projects don't get funded, that oftentimes there will be a disparity with the people who do the hands-on work and the people who are deciding where that money goes. And so thinking about how we can make our voices heard within those different spaces while still running a business. And I think it's often a challenge when you're starting off a business or you're sustaining a business over, years, decades, that when people have the best knowledge, they might either be like down in the trenches, starting their business up or sustaining their business, and they aren't given the time and the space to share that knowledge with other people. And so the ideas that are there are maybe they're behind the time of them actually being shared because the people don't have the time to do it. So I would love to see more grants given to people who have the experience in the time where they're actually doing the work. And also more training. But I think really on that higher level where we can pivot a little bit faster, and I know it's really hard for large organizations or especially government organizations to move that fast, but I think that would be really, really beneficial to move the perception and also who's working boots on the ground preservation, moving it forward.
Yeah, I agree. That whole thing about, where you have the folks who are just getting started who have some availability, but they don't have the experience to teach, versus the people who are established and suddenly they have no time. That's huge. Finding the time. I'm in my car coming back from a job site right now. And there's no way to always plan around these things, because sometimes you just, you had some people out sick or whatever, and actually being able to put together a whole workshop and speak at conferences and attend, whatever, it gets really difficult as any kind of business owner. For representation there, at least, and like hearing about those people and knowing that they exist and they're important and they're skilled and knowledgeable and all of that. I think in terms of getting people started too, I think there are resources out there where, like the Small Business Bureau or, places like that are kind of there to provide you with information about like how to get small business loans or how to start growing your business in terms of doing like payroll or, whatever. I actually found them very difficult to go through and not super helpful. Not necessarily because they didn't answer my calls or anything. It was sort of like they didn't really understand what my business was. So there's a problem with the preservation trades, like all of the preservation trades. I think like we don't have a NIAC code specific to us. Like for window restoration, my insurance company either has me listed as a carpenter, which I'm not, a painter, which I'm not, a conservator, or conservator is also kind of under, it's like grouped together with like dance somehow, some kind of like performing arts thing. It's like performing arts and conservation. Like it's a really weird combination. And there's nothing specific to historic architectural restoration or like a breakout of any of those carpentry, painting, anything that like relates to older buildings. It's all new construction. And so it gets really tricky. Like you really get into the weeds and you just have to find people along the way who will help you, and it makes getting everything going really difficult. And so if you started off in a more difficult place to begin with, it doesn't help. So I think obviously representation, women, people of color, like as much as we can, trying to be present for anybody who's looking to get into this, hiring more people from diverse backgrounds who would be interested in showing them that like you're welcome here. This is an option. Like you may not even have known this was an option. Here it is. And also like you belong here. Please come, and showing people how to get started. I've told so many of my employees, I mentioned already, like we're kind of getting out of residential windows. It doesn't mean the work isn't there. And I don't want to cut people off. And I've told a bunch of my crew, like, if anybody is like, was thinking about maybe going off on their own, I will teach you. I will give you these jobs. Like, please. I will develop a whole second company just to like anchor you and push you off on your own and starting a new company. Because yeah, there's so much work, but reaching the people who just don't know about it and then providing them the resources in such a weird, already kind of unsupported field, I think is what we can do right now. The who gives the grants, who decides the grants, I also agree on that. Like there's the people who have the money are not always the people who need it, or I guess who choosing the projects is based on who has the money. And so there's a lot of underrepresented communities, properties, etc., who don't get the work done that they really could need. I think I'm rambling now on this one, but kind of got there.
Yeah, it sounds like a couple different problems that all snowball together, and if we can attack on different levels, I just think you guys should start doing a PR campaign for preschoolers. Just let them know right up front that this is an option. So our next question is about what can already existing preservation organizations do to support future preservation? They've been around for a long time. They've maybe been doing things in a particular way for a long time. So if you could speak directly to those organizations, what would you ask of them and what would you want them to do?
I would say, and I think we've touched on this already in this discussion, but I would say be open to new ways of reaching people, be open to new ways of approaching projects. And like Lindsay just mentioned, just because it's a group of people or a project that you've never heard of or that is just starting off doesn't mean that it's not valid or extraordinary. I think there is often this, excuse me, this misperception of, well, I've never seen that before, so I don't trust it. And you just don't acknowledge it offhand. You just move on to the next thing, especially if you're, looking through a stack of applications for a certain project to fund. I think sometimes those new projects are the most exciting because people have the energy, because they've really thought about it, and just because they don't use the jargon, or they say it instead of write it, or the language that they use is something that you're not used to. Turn that mirror back around. Maybe the language that you use is something they're not used to. Really tease out what the intent is over how it's being conveyed to you. I think that's how things stay vibrant, and they stay in the present, and the eyes to the future rather than looking to the past, which might seem kind of unusual to be mentioning in the same breath of preservation. But preservation doesn't mean old and stayed. It means a reevaluation of something that you value that came from the past, but you're addressing it now. And how you address it now is maybe a way that you might not address it. You might not have looked at it in the past, even if it was 5 years ago. There are these new inroads with different types of materials coming onto the market, and reversibility, like Lindsay mentioned, versus, especially for us in architectural frameworks, sometimes you don't want something to be reversible because it's going to fail and your building falls apart, right? So like sort of marrying those two things together, and especially going to primary sources. Not telling someone else how their building should be preserved or how the object should be preserved. Entering into dialogue and saying, hey, what is really valuable to you? Historically, this thing has been valued by academics. What do you value? Do you value this thing, or is there this thing, another object off to the side that you actually really wanted to preserve, and your voice just never was heard up until this point? I think, resetting the value and entering, I know I keep on saying it, but I think it's so important, entering into dialogue, entering into collaboration, removing the perception of mentorship being hierarchical and having it more on an exchange of ideas rather than flowing in one direction. If that's the only snapshot that I could give, I think that's probably the biggest one, of listening both ways, having dialogue both ways, and not having it go in one direction.
Yes. I am all about that. I thinking about larger organizations, pre-existing organizations, my perception of most of them is that they are academics. I have an architect friend who's afraid to present in front of one of the organizations that we're a part of, that she's actually like a high-ranking member, because she doesn't want to get ripped apart in front of everybody, because there's not a great welcoming, like, let me tell you my experience and my knowledge, open environment. There's a lot of like, oh, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And it really closes you off from a lot of things, I think. And there's a preconceived notion that, I have a lot of architect friends. I know a lot of great architects, but it seems like when large architecture groups of architects get together, there's definitely a kind of a holier than thou when it comes to them versus the trades. We are definitely treated as a little bit second class, rather than the boots on the ground, getting like the real hands-on experience and being able to provide feedback for designs or material choices that were made. I do think the working relationships that I've had have been pretty good. I've had a lot of project managers and designers who have listened to us and paid attention to what we were saying and why we use something over something else. And usually when we come in, they've never worked with a historic preservation contractor before, and they have to for historic tax credit reasons. So they usually let us go. But I've had past issues with that where, paint products were used that that other window restoration contractors didn't like. I've heard about wood epox or wood epoxies being kind of outlawed by some larger national organizations because they're not historically appropriate now. But it's, I don't know. There's like a whole valuing, which way are we going? Are you really preserving exactly what is there? Or are you replacing everything in favor of just not using wood epox? Like, is it the value of the material, or is it the value of just having it perceived as a historic material? Or and then the livability of something. We work on things that actually have to be out in the environment. We're not working on museum objects. And I think a lot of times the academic side has a hard time accepting that. They think the materials that we use are a little bit subpar, not, the treatment isn't as delicate. We're not as anal about every little thing. Because honestly, like, we can't leave materials that are delicate or, just because they're historic doesn't mean that they're going to be good, or just because they were put in by a tradesperson 100 years ago doesn't mean that tradesperson was the best tradesperson, and maybe they made mistakes. We can't just value them just because they're old. They're not all good contractors were in the past, and not all bad contractors are in the present. So I think a lot more of that feedback, that interchange of communication and valuing people who don't necessarily have master's degrees. I think part of my part of the reason my company has succeeded the way that it has is because I can speak the lingo. I have a master's degree. I don't think it does a lot in my everyday life. I don't think it does a lot in the quality of my work or the projects that we are on. I think most of my project experience has come, or my knowledge base has come from on-site work, from job experience. I don't think school really did much. It's nice to have that piece of paper that I can, wave around in front of people, but it doesn't make me better than somebody who has 20 years of experience. It does maybe give you like a foot up, and so you know where you're standing when you get into the field a little bit, or you know how to talk to people, but it's not the end all be all. And I don't think that we need to have that kind of backing to support anything. And, I'm going to use it because I need to make a living. I like to support my team and make sure that the company is valued. So I'll say it loud and proud. I have a master's degree, but I don't even recommend to a lot of new people starting out, if they really want to be hands-on, that they even go that route at all. I think if they can get the hands-on experience working with somebody who is a knowledgeable tradesperson, that would be the route to go. And I hope that the larger preservation organizations realize that and value that experience, because we really do need more tradespeople. There's a shortage of new construction tradespeople, and we were already short. Now that the field is kicking off, now that there's all these historic tax credits, they're requiring all these things to be done, and there's no one out there to do them, or there's no businesses that are big enough, because we're just getting started. We barely figured out how to do business for ourselves, and then my company, we need like 20, 25 people to finish projects this summer. And that's just it's not what a lot of companies are set up to do. It's not their footprint. And so we really got to value that, the boots on the ground a lot more, value the mentorship where you can get it, and allowing those people to feel comfortable in those large organizations, without having to prove their educational background.
Thank you both. My next question is for people who aren't necessarily interested in becoming a tradesperson or starting their own company, but maybe somebody who lives in a historic home or is a resident or rents in a historic neighborhood. How can everyday people participate in historic preservation, and what should people do if they want to get involved in their local preservation movement?
I think what Lindsay was saying before about start local, right? Find your local preservation organizations. Here, there's the Oakland Heritage Alliance. Trying to remember what the comparable one is for San Francisco. There's walking tours. There's sometimes, depending where you are, like maybe even there's online courses that you can do that are for free. There's people on, Instagram that are sharing really interesting information, and TikTok. So like it doesn't have to be, like Lindsay was saying, it doesn't always have to be academic. Of course, you can go to, there's online publications for specific projects. For stained glass specifically, the SGA puts out Stained Glass Quarterly magazine, which is a tangible print magazine that still goes out. Their Corpus Vitriarum puts out Venimus, which is an international stained glass magazine that's digital. So yeah, you could do a lot of historic preservation support via your couch. And then you can also, go out and find like-minded groups of people. I think often looking into those organizations that will help you hone in what you really want to concentrate on, and use that as a stepping stone to connect with other groups and maybe companies. You could also just reach out to companies. You know, we always answer questions, you know, through our website. We have a pull down menu of like, you know, why are you trying to contact us? Do you have work, or are you curious? Do you want to do a tour? It's not an all, you know, one size fits all. It's really what is really interesting to you. And if I would also encourage people that if you do reach out to a person or an organization and you don't get a response back, or the response isn't the response that you expected or wanted or felt like a good fit, ask someone else. You know, that there are lots of people in different communities. You know, the flip side of not having, you know, there's these huge organizations that are great, but then there are these tiny little organizations that have popped up everywhere, and you'll find your tribe, you will find your preservation family. It just might take a bit, and you never know who you're talking with, who might say, oh, you're interested in X, why don't you should talk to these people.
Yeah, that the preservation community, I'm part of the professional, like obviously through Facebook. Facebook has got really great old house fix kind of groups. And then neighborhood groups. If you're in a historic neighborhood, they will usually have somebody who has some kind of experience, but they usually don't require, I will say, if you're like in an area that has like a historic design review board, they don't necessarily have historic preservation folks, like trained folks on those. Sometimes they have just an architect, just an engineer. They have people who happen to have lived in the neighborhood for 50 years, something like that. They don't actually have to be preservation minded. So there's, it's kind of, yeah, just keep looking, figure out what you really want to know. Don't just take the first person's word for it, like kind of immerse yourself. And then, you know, just be a resource yourself. If anybody asks, to create that community, just talk to your neighbors. If anybody is pulling out wood windows, you know, nobody should be shamed. There are a lot of reasons why people just can't get their old windows fixed. But maybe talk them into keeping them in their basement so that somebody in the future could come back and put them in. Or if, you know, there's a lot of reasons why people don't preserve things because of cost. So understanding why those costs are there, or if there's a building in your town that needs something, like it's just sitting empty, finding advocates to help you raise awareness of it, and then even potentially finding people to donate money, or a developer or potential purchaser of said building. Just being a good neighbor really is, I think, the best thing you can be. If you're in an old house in a place where they've developed new buildings all the way around you, maybe you kind of feel like you're on an island and you just need some emotional support. But if you are in like a historic community, and you want to be a part of the greater preservation good, definitely creating a space where you can speak up. And like we said earlier, like there's not necessarily people out there doing all the work just because they are a preservation organization. If you don't think enough is being said, be the person to say it. Get up and do something. The Young Preservationist organization in Ohio was really great, and they got a lot of attention for a bunch of buildings, and then they ended up combining with a couple of other cities that had Young Preservationist group in Buffalo and Louisville and St. Louis is what I was trying to say. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of them, and they became the Rust Belt Coalition. And they're maybe kind of sort of defunct now, but we did these really great like adult sleepover road trips to different cities just to like learn about the different historic cultures and historic built fabric in these different places. And yeah, if you want to get organized and be a part of the preservation movement, you do not have to be in the trades. There are lots of things you can do, and just being a voice to help share the good word, you know, so that we're not the only ones screaming to the toddlers to please learn about preservation.
Those are really awesome tips. I think one thing that I've really learned from our conversations over the last year is just being aware of the history that's there. You know, knowing something about, I just moved to a new neighborhood a few months ago, and I feel like every day I learn something new about my neighborhood and how it's changed over time and the different communities that have lived here over the years. And having that information at hand really helps me value the architecture that's here and the people who are here, people who are no longer here. And it's really part of the journey of helping to preserve this community, is to know what should be preserved and what can be preserved. And that's, I think, a really fascinating way to think about preservation. Isn't always going to be through structures, because structures aren't always there. So how can we preserve all of it together and find ways to tell those stories? So those are all the questions that I came up with for our conversation today, but there's always more questions to be asked, of course. And one thing that I've been thinking about a lot during this conversation is, in one of our very early conversations about this panel series, we talked about the idea of building for historic preservation. So if you're building something right now, thinking about how it will be preserved in the future. And I think that's a really forward-looking way to think about historic preservation as well. So do you have any tips for if somebody's building something new right now, or how can developers or contractors think about historic preservationists of the future and how they maybe want the structures that they're building now to be preserved in 50 or 100 years?
We often, especially now that we're thinking about and entering into public art, and every public artist I ever talk to, the question I always bring, and I was asked about this quite recently, actually, for this organization down in Los Angeles, is as the art is being built, and this can also apply to a building, documenting everything that you're doing, because you think, I'm going to remember what that is, or if I have to come back, I'll fix it later. But especially as the projects get larger, and we've definitely seen this in the last 2.5 years, where a company that's really stable still has a lot of turnover with people deciding to work remote or deciding that they want to go into another field. We document everything that we do, down to the types of materials that we use, where we source them, and if there's a lot number, down to the lot number. So then if there's a recall for that in the future, people don't have to do, the preservationists don't have to do that part of the research. It's already, you've got this little cheat sheet, cliff notes of everything that was used. And so you don't have to reverse engineer what someone was doing without talking to them. And, you know, we have the beauty of digital now. So you could take a quick video of like, I put this together. And I think also, I put this together this way. And I think also, sort of, again, talking about that transition from architect to GC to specialist, there does tend to be this closed-minded perception of like, well, you wouldn't understand, so why would I write this down? Why would I share this information with you? Or this is what we did, and isn't it amazing? And we didn't have any problems. And if someone tells you they had no problems, that's a lie, or it's just like this fantasy, right? So I think breaking down those walls of like trial and error and saying like, I used this material because it was recommended by this organization. And to the best of my knowledge, it was the best thing on the market. And then this project took me 3 years, and halfway through the project, someone identified that this material didn't work. And so we switched and went to something else. That is as valid of saying like, oh, look, it's more valid than saying like, oh, everything went well, right? So the next generation doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. So documentation a lot of people don't think it sounds exciting, or they think it's an add-on and they go, oh, I don't really need it. But I think it's so vital for the future of preservation, especially if you're thinking about a limited amount of funds. You don't have to pay someone to go and do all that research as to like what the materials are if you have this list right in front of you. So that's what I would encourage is, give documentation its name in the sun, but give it protective UV light so you always have it.
I mean, I don't really need to expand on that at all. Yeah, I think for new construction, everybody's always excited about the new products, and everybody wants to try the new products, and there's no time tested evidence of how they're going to fare. So I think if there's something that was used for a particular reason, if it was to fail in the future, thinking of what the original designer, what their reasoning was for using that, and potentially you could find a really good alternative to that is longer lasting, that takes that design choice into consideration. I think that's something that we run into where it's like, they meant to do this, it didn't work out. I don't necessarily think we should keep the original material, even though that is the kind of go-to move, because it just, it won't last. So what can we do to replace it with? And a lot of times this is like the quality of wood in windows. That can be an example, or specific paints maybe. But I think for me, the easiest recommendation is just to go with the best time-tested materials you possibly can. Budget is obviously a constraint always, but for the sake of not having anybody look at a product and be like, what the heck is that? I've never seen it before. It's so much easier. Public art bronze is popular for a reason. People know how to use it. They know how to work on it. They know how to maintain it. It survives well. And, it's just a safe choice. And other products are not always that safe. There's a lot of deterioration. Even when you know what it is, sometimes it's just not the best option from the get-go. Unless you also leave behind a major maintenance plan in place to be able to take care of it before you even start seeing issues, so that people are aware of what the problems you see coming could be. Something like that.
Absolutely. I love the idea of an owner's manual for like your house or your storefront, or when you buy it, you just get all the information you need to know about the history of it. You can keep on maintaining. That sounds wonderful. So this is the end of our 4-part series, Preservation in Practice. And I want to just pass the mic one more time to Ariana and Lindsay for any of their final concluding thoughts on this conversation or any of the conversations we've had over the last year.
First of all, thank you again for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's been really great, personally, just to check in virtually with other like-minded folks. And I don't think I ever would have sought you out, Lindsay, had we not been in this initial group. And so now I have a new preservation friend, which is really great. And also, we sort of talked about this before we started officially. I would love to continue this conversation, 1 year out, 5 years out, to see where we're at and see how we continue to push the boundaries on what preservation is, who does preservation, and what our approaches are, because I'm sure we're going to find new things. So that's really great. But mainly just thank you for this time and space.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much. It's been great. And I feel like it's been a lot of great opportunities that come with it, along with meeting cool new people. I guess since we've talked a lot about health and safety over the different talks, just doing a final, there are ways to be safe, but also be aware old buildings have old materials, new buildings have old materials, you know, be safe in anything you do. There's been a lot of talk about removing lead from just removing lead in general and not putting it in production anymore. And that's been kind of a scare for, I know the stained glass industry, but it just in general, like it creates a scare about lead and lead hazards and all of those types of things in the preservation industry, which is something that we have to work with, you know, when we love these old buildings and we want to take care of them. So we've learned to take care of them and keep ourselves and our clients safe and healthy. And just hope that anybody else who decides to delve into this, definitely just look into your safety first and foremost. And we can pull you along with the fun passion projects after that.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much for your participation in this set of panels. It has been wonderful to learn so much from both of you and from all of our audience members and their wonderful questions. And with that, we are going to sign off. And hopefully, as Ariana said, we'll see you guys in the future. We can check back in and see where the historic preservation movement ends up. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.